Woo-wee, what's going on YouTube? It's Donnie all day. Let's talk knives. Let's talk knives and let's talk knife shop. So there are all kinds of different knife handle materials, and there's all kinds of different kinds of knives, and there's all kinds of environments where you would use said knives and said knife handle materials. You have your hot climates, your cold climates, your icy climates, and you have your wet climates. Out here in New England, we get a pretty fair share of rain throughout the year. Right now, it's out there, it's raining, and that's what really sparked this. Was what if you live in an area that's really wet? What are the best knife grips you can possibly use for a wet environment? Now, I'm not going to get into wet and cold or wet and icy or even like wet and humid or wet. No. We're just talking wet, a general wetness, wet. And we're gonna go over just what could be the best option as opposed to not so much. So you have some knives like this guy right here. It's a plastic, it's a faux bone, a plastic material. This not only is plastic, the faux bone look, but it's really super smooth. When this thing is wet, it's like glass. There's nothing to absorb water. And when you're talking about knife grips in the wetness, in the rain, or if you're at the lake or you're doing things by a river where you're going to be constantly using your knife for maybe doing things with like fish, deboning and filleting a fish, you're going to need something that's going to hold, or if you're getting waterfowl, or if you're just using your knife with something else. Maybe you caught yourself a rabbit and you're trying to gut it and you're in the river and you're trying to clean it as you go and you're needing to hold your knife while you're working, or if it's just wet. You just have rain. Maybe it mists. Maybe every single morning, even on dry days, like out here when we go camping in the morning, it's wet. There's dew on the grass. There's wet everywhere. So anything you go to do when you go to get out and get that morning fire going to start your camp cook, it's wet. Everything's wet. So you need a knife handle that's going to be good. So I didn't bring out anything that has bone, just this to show you. But bone is pretty much the same way. Now you are going to have different texturing. So you can have bone with little ridges and all kinds of stuff, and that's going to do you better. But is it the best? And I'm not going over which ones are terrible, because I can use this right now. I can go outside and I can chop with it while it's wet and still hold on to it and be okay. The main reason is because the shape. It expands outward just like it should to control when something happens in that kind of climate. It would benefit the rain opening out. So while all these knives I can and have used in wet conditions, it doesn't necessarily mean they're great for it, but there are a few that are. So you have your plastics, and you have your bones, your faux bones, things like that. I wouldn't recommend them for wet weather or wet conditions, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you can't use one. So if you have your favorite hunting knife is a bone handle, and you're thinking, oh, but I got a bone handle, huh? You're telling me it's bad? I use it well, obviously, then it keeps working. And here's the thing: if I tell you that these are the top three, and you have one that's not in the top three that you constantly use, that's proof that you can still use it. Don't think, oh, great, now I have to get rid of my knife because some idiot told me that it's no good for the wet weather, even though I use it in wet weather. Don't be dumb. So next we're going to talk about like stainless, aluminum, titanium, any of the metals. If you have a plain metal or a plain steel grip in the wetness, it's not great. It's just not great. Does it mean, of course, that you can't use it? No, you can still use it. But what I'm telling you is metal is not going to be your top choice, even if it's got really nice frag pattern like this, something that you can grab onto, or if it's milled and done nice. There are ways you can mill them. And I was looking for one that I just had out recently that was milled, but it's not next to me. But you could see, like, all, even this titanium with all these, it helps. It definitely helps in the wetness, but that still doesn't make it ideal. It still doesn't make it great. So I wouldn't recommend in wet conditions any kind of metal grip. So then there's really only a few more worth talking about that are the commons, because there's tons of stuff. There's kinds of acrylics and just all kinds of goofy stuff that you could use for knife handling. But we're not going to get into every single one. We're going to get into basically the commons. And so one of the number one commons is wood, regular wood. And I have to say, this one is rosewood, and this is fantastic. Even in the wetness, wood can get, depending on how the wood is finished, it can get a little slimy. So you have to have a well-prepared wood. It has to be treated and taken care of. Like on my D-Bad Norseman, man, this is the nicest sax I've ever used in my life. Of course, I designed it to be the nicest, so that's why. But this thing is awesome. And the wood handle on this, even when it's wet, is still good. Do the finger grooves help? Abso-freaking-lutely. Do these little lines right here are little sweat channels and wet channels? Do they help? Even though it doesn't seem like they should, it absolutely does. It helps absorb some of that water. Wood is absorbent. Depending on how you're coated, you might just have water slide right off, depending on what's on it. And if you're not treated at all, you can end up just rotting your handle away. You don't want to do that. But wood is not a bad choice when you're talking about wet conditions. Just wet. It's not a bad choice. Does that make it one of the top three choices, however? No. No, it does not. Good is good, but better's better. So now we're going to get into my top three choices for wet weather grips. And the first one I'm going to bring up is rubber. Rubber. You're going to see a lot of dive knives that are rubber. And the reason is because it's rubber. Rubber is really, really good in the wetness. Can rubber get that slimy feel? Absolutely. If you have a smooth rubber handle, it might not be that great, but it might not be that bad, because some rubber is different than others. They sell gloves at like Dick's that are these rubber gloves that in any condition, they're just sticky. I mean, they just grab onto everything. And it's just great for wet weather. It really is. They're not as absorbent as some other things, but because of the material, it has a natural tact. And because it's a natural softness as well. I mean, there's rubbers out there that are stone hard. They're more of almost like a plastic than a rubber, but it's still rubber. Most rubbers are not, though. Most rubbers have a slight amount of give. So when you're grabbing that knife, your fingers are going to feel into it. Now with this, the cold steel one, you can see they did a really good job texturing these handles. Are these my favorite handles? Not even close. But they are really grippy and really good in cold weather. I mean, but wet weather. So if you're looking for a wet weather knife and it happened to have a rubber grip, well, you might just be doing okay. Does that make it the best? No. So next, we're going to use the D-Bad 1200, my all-time favorite kukri. This has got Maarta scales. Maarta is great for wetness. And I wanted to use Maarta in this because it's a Nepalese knife, the kukri. And what do you find when you get there? Jungle. What's in the jungle? Wetness. Everything's always wet in the jungle. So Maarta is actually an absorbent material. It sucks water in. It actually your hand oils, your natural oils, will suck into the Maarta material over time, especially if you have like a tan Maarta, over time giving it this really sweet patina created from your own grip, which is really cool. It's really, really cool. Maarta is amazing. It can take on all kinds of color. Like you can color Maarta anything you want. You can dye it, but it also, or the reason I should say, is because it's so absorbent. It is an amazing material for if you're going to be out, let's say, in a humid area, especially, and I know we're going to talk about humid, but because of the sweat in your hand, that wetness, and this is where it comes back to wetness, the wetness, when it absorbs into the grip, you're going to have a much, much sturdier grip. It's going to be way better. So you're thinking, well, he said the top three, but clearly Maarta, absorbent, awesome, grippy, super awesome. That's got to be the best. Well, it's not. There's one more. There's one more that I would put above that, and the reason is because it's even more absorbent. Cord wrapped. A cord wrapped knife. It's generally a wooden knife or a wooden handle like this one, or it's just a straight steel handle, like a full tang wrapped in cordage. Right? They come in so many different kinds of cordage. You can do a threading, right? You can do like a 550 style cord. Any kind of cording, especially, is super absorbent. That's what it is. It's a cord. It's literally like when you put clothing on and the water hits your clothing and it seeps in and you can feel it on your skin. It's because the fibers absorbed all that water and it just came right through. Corded knives, and this obviously is one of my own, the D-Bad Mission 1. Freaking love it. It is super good in wet weather, and corded knives might even be better when they're wet than they are when they're dry, because once that material gets a little wet, gets a little something on it, it's just going to bite in like crazy because you're making it more tacked, right? More tacky. Like if your shirt, if I do this, and especially on a nice material, it's really smooth, really, really smooth. And then if I put a little wetness, my hand might stick to it a little bit. It's like when your shirt gets wet and it sticks to your skin and you constantly have to do this. It's because the fibers are wet and they're holding on to whatever's near them. So when you have a corded handle and it gets wet or sweat wet, it's going to grip your hand even better. And that is why a corded grip is the best grip for not cold, but for wet weather knife grips. So if you're in a spot where you know you're going to be drenched or you know you're going to be in a wet environment, having a corded knife is not a bad option because it's the best. So that's it. That's it for this one. I just wanted to go over that. It's a video that I thought about doing before and I never got to, and today I just decided to, and tra-la-la, boom da. So that's it for this one. Now I got a bunch of knives to sit here and play with. I am Donnie B all day. Until next video.